Welcome again to Codemotion Madrid, and thank you for having me back. My name is Chad Arimura. You can heckle me on Twitter, at Chad Arimura. You might remember me as Ebenezer Scrooge. If you came last year, I stood on this stage, same outfit probably, and I reenacted the Christmas Carol to present serverless computing and the future of it. It was totally embarrassing, and I apologize, but I think it came off okay. So thank you for having me back. At least that's a good sign. Today's talk is a lot different. Last year's was kind of acting. This year is more kind of speaking from my heart. It's about thinking like a founder. And it's not just for founders and CEOs, but it's about anybody who wants to think like a founder, because that's actually a pretty positive characteristic if you're at any company. You're sort of, you don't let walls kind of keep you back. You have perseverance. You have drive to succeed. And these are characteristics that, as a founder, you have to have, or else failure is imminent. And I speak with experience. Most of my career, I've been in startups. So for 20 years now, it's actually been 20 years now, where I founded my first company, alldorm.com, out of a college dorm room at Santa Clara University in the Bay Area. And little did I know when my co-founder walked across the hallway and said, I need to register a domain name. And in 1999, registering domain names was actually not quite as easy as it is today. And I was like the only technical person that he knew. So I lived right across the hall, and he said, oh, yeah, by the way, do you want to start a company? I said, yeah, just get out of my room. And little did I know that would actually be the next 8 years of my life, kind of setting the stage for my career in startups. Fast forward a couple years, I started a consulting company where we were simply a cash flow business, had about 10 engineers building software for clients. And then from there, we actually started building the first products for my company, Iron.io, which was a venture-backed company where we raised about $20 million from venture capitalists. We were doing kind of mid-seven figures ARR, had a team of about 40, and then sold the company and joined Oracle 2 years ago, which is where I am today. So I'm going to start with a quote. By the way, can someone just give me a signal when my 15 minutes is kind of coming? Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to start with a quote that an investor told me at one of our very first board meetings. He said, Chad, the CEO has 3 main functions: get the people on the ship, chart the ship's course, and make sure that you have enough fuel to cross the ocean. Now, I'm going to use this as a framework for the rest of my talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to think like a founder in terms of these 3 items, but unless you're actually building a boat, this is an analogy. The analogy is really people, vision, and capital. These are the 3 most important things. If you're doing anything else outside of these 3 things, you're probably stretching yourself too thin as a founder. So let's start with people. Of course, the first people in your company are going to be your founding team. And there's an analogy that a founding team is like a marriage, and I actually find this to be so absolutely true. Because if you think about what a marriage is, it's a union between 2 people, usually, and it's till death do we part. You take vows. You vow to be with each other for the rest of your life through thick and thin. You have children together, you share bank accounts together, you share houses together, and you change. In order to evolve, you have to evolve together or else the marriage won't work. You commit yourself. It's the same for a founding team. A founding team has to have the same commitment. And so that's why the first lesson is to choose wisely who your founding team is. It's absolutely important that you are very careful about who you go into this union with. But as my first story would show, you don't always get to choose your co-founders as precisely as you would like. And so in any case, you want to make sure to constantly strengthen the relationship. And this involves things like dreaming together, getting out of the office, getting professional help, which sounds kind of cheesy, but it really does help. In my first company, there was 4 co-founders, and one thing that we had to do was get essentially like a safe space to talk to each other, because we were college students, we were growing and learning as people, and you evolve and you change, and it's really hard to kind of stay in line with each other. So we had a professional mediator that would actually come in every couple weeks to help us create a safe space to kind of grow together. And my second company, well, the venture-backed one, my co-founder and I actually had the joy of living together for multiple years, which was actually, not everybody gets that opportunity, but it really helped us because at the end of the day, we'd leave the office, we'd come home, we'd have a beer together, and we actually evolved our relationship that way. So we really got to know each other, and that was really important. So next up, you have your executive team. And the only thing I'll say about the executive team is that you have to, of course, choose wisely, but you have to empower your executive team. It's absolutely critical. One thing that, as all of us, or most of us in this room are developers and engineers, and we're really, really good at solving complex problems. Complex problems are kind of why we got into this industry, because programming and development and software architecture are just things that you can sit down and you can zone out and you can kind of come up with a solution. It's such a wonderful process to go through. But that skill that gets you to be a great developer, a great engineer, actually holds you back as a co-founder or a leader of a team or a manager. And so you need to learn to empower your team. One thing that I did was, my last company, we were an operations company. We were running a 24/7 service, and every time there was an issue, our customers felt pain. And that pain, I felt just deeply inside. And so I would jump in, help solve problems, help keep the system up. I would watch the matrix of paper trail and logs and kind of, do the kind of Keanu Reeves matrix thing, and suddenly I would help solve the problem. And I felt like a hero. But on reflection, I was actually holding my team back from being self-sufficient in that. And so that's something that you really have to learn. And then I put a few quotes in here to kind of support my case. I sent out emails to a couple friends of mine, and there's also quotes from people that I found on the internet. James Tamplin, founder and CEO of Firebase, he said, hire great people and give them autonomy. That was kind of his #1 tip, which lined up really nicely. Okay, so next you have culture. Culture is what sets the precedent for decision-making in your organization when you're not there. Again, culture sets the precedent for how decisions are made when you're not in the room. So it's absolutely critical to have and to sort of steer your culture. But your culture is you. As a founder or a leader, even as an individual on your team, as a developer, your culture becomes the makeup of the people on that team. So you really want to make sure that you embody what you want to be, make decisions, because don't expect your team to be something different. You can't come up and put a plaque on the wall and say, we care about customers, and then in a private room with your team say, oh, you know what, don't worry about that customer. Because that's going to emanate from you, and it's going to affect your entire team. So that's framework #1 is people. Second, we have vision. And the most important thing about vision is really to have one. It's a North Star. As engineers, we come in and we solve problems, but we forget that what we're actually solving a problem for is some kind of business value or something. We're trying to guide our company towards something. Having that vision and just repeating that over and over again is absolutely critical, because a North Star, like culture, is how people make decisions in your organization. If you have to choose between A or B, and A or B are sort of, you don't know the answer, logic would sort of dictate, you don't know which direction to go, vision is what helps your team establish that decision. So vision is absolutely critical, and you have to continually reinforce it. You see this continually reinforced slide a few times in my presentation. It's absolutely critical. If you think you've said something too much, say it some more. Because what you realize is every day you live and you breathe these things, but you forget that it takes 10, 20, 30 times to say something to have it really kind of embed in people's ethos. So you have to reinforce these things. And that's something that I learned, because I would feel like, oh gosh, Chad's talking about vision again, or culture, or I'm tired of this, I want to go get some work done. But what I found is that the team really appreciated that time that I would spend talking about this, because it helped create that North Star. And then finally, you have to have a product vision. Product is actually why we're all doing this. Maybe it's a service, maybe your product is the output of your team, but you have to have a product vision. And you have to get out of the building to establish that product vision. If you're not talking to customers, you don't know really what you're building, because at the end of the day, a customer is what drives your business forward. One thing that I learned in my last business was I was sitting down with the director of engineering of a major grocery outlet in the Bay Area, and he said, Chad, we don't really have access to the A players. We're not like an Oracle or Amazon or Google or whatnot. And we really hire the B players. You don't hear people say that very often. But they said, you know what? But that's great, because they're passionate, they love their job. And what we found is that your product actually helps those B players become A players, because we take out a number of the steps that complicate their lives. And that is actually one of the realizations where we started using the expression serverless in around 2010, because we felt like serverless represented removing complexity and doing less and making B players A players, but we couldn't make that our slogan. And then finally, focus. One more lesson from my last company. We were doing a couple $1 million in ARR after a couple years. And a major telecommunications provider came by and said, we want to take your cloud service, we want to put it on-prem on our cloud. And we said, no, we can't do that because this is our business over here. And we said, well, we'll make it $1 million. And they said, okay. And so we scrambled for 6 months to deliver them a product. And what we did was we essentially justified the building of that product. And we said, you know what, there's 30 other customers we can go to. They can all pay $1 million. We'll charge them more. It's going to be really great. So we spent 6 months. A couple of our key engineers, we took them kind of out of the product and had them build this specialized product. Guess how many times we sold that? 0. So that was a lesson in focus for me. That set us back quite a bit in terms of innovation from those key engineers. And again, Joel Spolsky so he was one of the founders of Stack Overflow and Trello. You might see him on the internet. He said, nothing works better than innovating your own product. Just improve it. Incremental improving. And he makes some really fantastic products. So finally, the final piece of this is capital. Capital comes from all forms. It comes from credit cards, it comes from loans, it comes from your great Aunt Shirley, it comes from venture capitalists or angel investors. And the key thing here is that when somebody gives you money, generally they're not just handing you a bag of money, even though, if you get that, congratulations. Generally, they want that money back, and they want something on top of that. Maybe it's an interest rate in the form of a loan, or maybe it's a return on investment if it's your investors. And there's a time frame to that. And the most important thing here is you got to fear that treadmill, because once you're on that treadmill, it's hard to get off that treadmill. There's only a few things that can help you get off that treadmill. Because there is a limited amount of time. People want their money back, and they're going to kind of force you through this process. And I'm not saying that raising money is a bad thing. It's actually a great thing for building a team, building a product, scaling your organization. But you have to be careful. And I actually just read this quote as I was making these slides. Fred Wilson from Union Square Ventures, avc.com, I think. Positive cash flow puts you in control versus the capital markets. So if your business is doing positive cash flow, then you're kind of off the treadmill for the most part because you don't need more money. Now, of course, loans do come due, but there's different nuances to that. But really, at the end of the day, this is one of the only things that can keep you off that treadmill. So I've talked about sort of these 3 pieces of starting a business. I'm really only going to end it on a couple quotes here. And these are, this is supposed to be an inspiring talk, so I can hopefully end on an inspiring note. But again, we're all here to create something. Whether you're part of a larger organization or you're starting your own company, you're here to create. And that's one of the beautiful things about being an engineer. It's also a very beautiful thing about being a founder, because you're creating something out of essentially nothing. It's really an incredible feeling. We're pioneers, whether we are part of a large organization or part of our own small business. So if things are not failing, you're not innovating enough. You might know some of these quotes. That's Elon Musk, Tesla, and SpaceX. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking, don't settle. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, that was a Steve Jobs quote early on at Apple. I got inspired to do this on the airplane because I watched the Bill Gates documentary, so the new one on Netflix. If you do work that you love and the work fulfills you, the rest will come. Oprah Winfrey, that was a pretty cool quote. And that was when she had an afro. She actually doesn't like that picture, but I wanted to include it. Software is eating the world, Mark Andreessen. That's another great quote we've all heard before, but it really is, and we're all in here to be pioneers in that space. Personal computers have become the most empowering tool ever created. Now, of course, this was Bill Gates. Oh, be nice to nerds. Chances are you end up working for one. That was a Bill Gates quote. Here he is with Paul Allen in the early days of Microsoft. So we are still pioneers. I literally just put this slide in here, but I thought it was actually a great quote to segue into my presentation. So what will your quote be? Thank you very much.